Ever stayed late at the office? When the lights hum too loud? And you swear someone's still there? Tonight, you'll hear 10 real stories that prove some offices should never be empty. Story 1. The Woman in the Reflection. This story comes from a game developer in Orlando, Florida. It started during one of the most stressful weeks of his life. Deadlines were crushing him, and he had no choice but to stay late at the office, night after night, working on code that needed to be perfect. It was a Wednesday night. The kind of night where the rain doesn't just fall. It attacks the windows with such force that you can barely hear yourself think. The office was pitch black outside, except when lightning would crack across the sky, lighting up everything for just a split second before plunging it back into darkness. He wasn't completely alone that night. His coworker Chaz was there too, fighting his own battle against deadlines and exhaustion. But around 8 or 9 o'clock, Chaz knocked on his door. He was heading out. He asked if it was okay to lock up the place. "Of course," he said. And just like that, he heard the front door slam shut, and he was alone. The office had a strange layout. It was shaped like the letter L. The entrance was at one end, and his office was tucked away in the corner, down the short line of the L. The perfect corner office, except on nights like this when being in the corner meant being as far away from the exit as possible. Time passed. He kept working, but his eyes were getting heavy. He needed coffee. So he walked down the hall to the kitchen, leaned against the counter, and waited for the coffee maker to heat up. The rain continued its assault on the windows. The lightning continued to flash, and then he heard it. The sound of a door closing. Not the heavy front door. One of the smaller doors. One of the office doors down the hall. He peeked his head out, looking both ways down the corridor. Nothing. He called out. No answer. But someone had to be there, right? Doors don't just close on their own. He left the kitchen and started checking every door in the office. All locked. He walked down the 2 halls, testing each one. Locked, locked, locked. Then he got to his hallway, the little hall where his office was. All 3 doors were shut, including his, and he knew without a doubt that he had left his door open. 1000% sure. There was no draft. The windows were all closed. Someone had to be in there. Someone had to be playing a prank on him. He threw the door open with force, expecting someone to jump out at him, but there was nothing. His chair was where he left it. His computer was still on. Everything was exactly as it should be. It was odd, yes, but he pushed the thought away and went back to work. More time passed. The rain kept falling. The lightning kept striking. It was getting very late now, and he was finally satisfied with his progress. He saved everything and started shutting down his computer. He clicked the shutdown button, then turned off the screen. The screen went black. And in that black screen, in the reflection, he saw her, a woman, standing directly behind him. His heart didn't just drop. It disappeared. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. But somehow, he didn't scream. Somehow, he didn't turn around. He just stood up slowly, grabbed his bag, and walked to the door as calmly as he could, pretending he hadn't seen anything. He didn't look back. He didn't close the door. He just walked down the hall until he thought he was far enough away, and then he ran. He ran faster than he'd ever run in his life. Down the flight of stairs, out the exit, through the pouring rain to his car. The whole time he was terrified that she was following him, that any second he'd feel a hand on his shoulder, that any second she'd grab him. When he finally got to his car, he locked the doors and took a moment to breathe. Then he looked up at his office window. The light was still on. And he swears he saw the blinds move just slightly, as if someone was standing on the other side looking down at him. He called his boss, Miranda, immediately. She confirmed that no one else should have been there. She said she'd call the night security guard to check the office. At least he could go home. Later that night, Miranda called him back. The security guard had searched the entire office. Nobody was there. He told her what he saw one more time, and even she was freaked out. There was only one camera in the entire office, located at the end of the longer hall by the kitchen area. They checked the footage. The camera never caught any woman walking around the office that night. Not a single frame. She was never there. Or at least, she was never supposed to be there. Story 2. The Thing in the Basement. A long time ago, a man worked security at an office building in Midtown Manhattan. It was mid-November, and one of the offices wanted to start decorating for Christmas. The decorations were stored in the basement along with other supplies. His job was usually simple: stand in the lobby, watch people come and go. It was uneventful, boring even. But on this cold November Monday, everything changed. An employee from a dermatology office on one of the upper floors came down to the lobby. She said she'd gone to the basement to get the decorations, but all the lights were out. The elevator wasn't working. And worse, there were multiple broken doors down there, implying someone had broken in over the weekend. That's when it became his problem. He was the only security guard on duty that day. He grabbed a flashlight and headed for the stairs, since the elevator wasn't running to the basement level. He'd be lying if he said he wasn't nervous. The basement level was nothing but storage, electrical components, and janitorial equipment. It was a maze of corridors and rooms, and navigating it in complete darkness with nothing but a flashlight made every hair on his body stand up. As he moved through the corridors, he found the broken doors. The employee had been right, but these weren't just broken. Some of them looked like they'd been destroyed with an axe. The damage was severe, violent. This was serious. He was just a security guard. He didn't make enough money to go searching for potentially dangerous people in a dark basement without a weapon. He looked into each room with a broken door, but everything still seemed to be there. No signs of theft. But someone had clearly been down here with a purpose. Then he heard it. A slam. Somewhere else in the basement. And suddenly, everything went dead silent. All the ambient noise, the hum of the boiler, the sound of pipes, everything stopped. He was now in a completely silent basement where every sound he made echoed 10 times louder. Someone was still down here. He knew it. That slam proved it. Stupidly, he called out, "Anyone here?" His voice echoed down the corridor. He started moving back the way he came. He wasn't staying down there another second. This was a job for the police. He was almost to the stairs when he heard it. Heavy breathing. Coming from around the final corner. It was unmistakable. Someone was breathing heavily, just out of sight. He was terrified. Why was he in this situation? He turned off his flashlight and tiptoed closer to peek around the corner. Weirdly, the breathing stopped. He whispered, "Hello?" Then he turned the flashlight back on. Even though the light wasn't aimed directly at it, he still saw it clearly. An extremely tall figure, hunched over, facing the wall. It was holding some kind of long object in its hand. A weapon, maybe. He said his because there was no way a person this big could have been a woman. But when the light hit, the figure turned its face toward him. It was pale, abnormally long. The person looked bald. The face was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. He didn't wait to see more. He ran past the figure toward the stairs, screaming back at it, "The cops are coming! You need to leave now!" He ran all the way back up the stairs, through the basement door, locked it behind him, and called 911. Multiple police cars arrived. At least 4 officers went down into the basement to search for the intruder. He felt useless, but removing a dangerous armed person from a dark basement was not in his job description. When the officers came back, they were alone. They couldn't find anyone. An electrician came to fix the electrical issues. Apparently, the circuit box in the basement had been tampered with. With the lights back on, the police searched again. Still nothing. There were multiple stairways leading up from the basement. The figure could have left through any of them. Everyone believed what he saw, though. Those doors didn't smash themselves. But for the next week, he took sick days. Every night, he'd lay awake in bed, constantly checking the dark corners of his room, terrified that he'd see that tall, hunched figure standing there watching him. Story 3: The Clinic That Wasn't There. In 2002, a woman got her first job ever at a call center in Makati. She worked the graveyard shift at a brand new office site. The layout was strange. It was shaped like an elongated donut, with the elevator lobby and main doors in the center, and the office space wrapping around it in 2 long hallways and 2 shorter ones. The office was still under construction. One half was fully operational, bright and well lit, with managers' offices and a pantry. The other half was reserved for conference rooms, storage, the nurse's office, and restrooms. But this side was unfinished. Concrete floors, wires sticking out of sockets, dim lighting. The guards would turn off the lights completely on that side since they figured nobody was using it anyway. As a result, people avoided that side of the office. If you needed to use the restroom, you just made a mad dash to and from it and got out as quickly as possible. 2 weeks into production, her teammate became very sick with a terrible migraine. Their team leader suggested she visit the nurse's office, which was located on the unfinished side of the office. Our storyteller offered to accompany her. They walked to the nurse's office, identified by a sign above the door. When they got there, they found the door locked, but the lights were on inside. The door had a vertical window panel, so they peeked inside. They saw all the medical equipment, a sick bed, a desk, everything you'd expect to find in a fully equipped clinic. Except there was no nurse. They figured the nurse had just gone on break, so they decided to come back later. After half an hour, they returned to the nurse's office, only to find that the light was now off. They were annoyed, thinking maybe the nurse had gone home. But they checked the door anyway to see if there was a sign or note with the nurse's schedule. For some reason, she tried the door handle, despite knowing the light was off. The door opened. She stepped inside. There was no nurse's office. Despite the sign above the door clearly saying that's where it was supposed to be, there was nothing. The room was completely empty, just concrete walls and floors. A small nightlight in an exposed socket cast barely enough light to see. No beds, no cabinets, no medical equipment, nothing. It was like they had dreamed up the clinic they saw earlier. They checked the sign over and over to make sure it was the right room. It was. But the clinic was gone. A security guard approached them at that point, asking what they were doing poking around in an unfinished clinic. They tried to explain what had happened, but he clearly thought they were making it up. As they were arguing with him, they all suddenly stopped talking. The temperature dropped. Not gradually, instantly. They could feel it in their bones. They shivered. Their hair stood on end. Hearts started racing. Nobody could speak for a full minute. The air felt heavy, oppressive, wrong. Finally, her teammate burst into hysterical tears. The guard, now visibly nervous, shooed them away and locked the door to the supposed nurse's office. They were escorted back to their team's area, and they explained everything to their team leader. He just sat there stunned as he listened. Her teammate couldn't stop crying. She started hyperventilating so badly that they had to send her to Makati Med. The incident was never brought up again. Everyone who worked there knew, but nobody ever talked about it. Story 4: The Midnight Visitor. A woman worked the night shift at a small accounting firm in Seattle. The office was located on the third floor of an old building that had been converted from apartments decades ago. She was often the only person there after 10 p.m., finishing up reports and reconciling accounts. One night, around midnight, she was working in her cubicle when she heard the front door open. She assumed it was the cleaning crew, even though they usually came earlier. She called out, "Hello?" No response. She heard footsteps walking down the hallway, slow and deliberate, but they stopped before reaching the main office area. She got up to check, but the hallway was empty. The front door was closed and locked from the inside. She checked every room. Nobody was there. She went back to her desk, feeling uneasy but trying to focus on her work. Then she heard it again. Footsteps. This time, they were right outside her cubicle. She could hear someone breathing. She slowly stood up and looked over the cubicle wall. Nothing. But when she sat back down, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. There were wet footprints on the floor. Leading from the hallway, stopping right at her cubicle. She hadn't heard anyone come in. The door was still locked, but the footprints were there, fresh and dripping. She grabbed her things and left immediately, not even bothering to shut down her computer. The next morning, her supervisor found her desk exactly as she'd left it, with all her work still open on the screen. But the footprints were gone. She never worked alone at night again. Story 5: The Locked Room. A man worked at support at a pharmaceutical company in New Jersey. The office building was massive, with multiple floors and hundreds of employees. There was one room on the second floor that was always locked. Room 217. It had been locked for as long as anyone could remember. Nobody had a key. Nobody knew what was inside. The company had been through multiple management changes, and the knowledge of what the room contained had been lost. One day, he was tasked with running new network cables through the building. According to the blueprints, the cables needed to run through room 217. His supervisor told him they'd finally gotten permission to break the lock and open the room. When he got to the door, there was already a maintenance worker there with bolt cutters. They cut the lock and pushed the door open. It resisted at first, like something was blocking it from the inside, but with enough force, it opened. The room was empty. Completely empty. No furniture, no equipment, nothing. Just bare walls and a dusty floor. Except for one thing. In the center of the room, there was a chair. A simple office chair facing the door. And on the chair, there was a name tag. His name tag. With his name on it. He'd never been in that room before. The room had been locked for years. But there was his name, printed clearly on a company name tag, sitting on that chair like it had been waiting for him. He left the room immediately and refused to go back. They had to get someone else to run the cables. He never found out how his name tag got in that room, and he never wanted to know. Story 6. The Printer That Wouldn't Stop. A woman worked at a law office in Chicago. The office had an old printer that had been there since the firm opened in the 1980s. It was massive, loud and constantly breaking down, but the partners refused to replace it because it still worked well enough. One evening, she was working late on a brief that was due the next morning. Around 9 p.m., she heard the printer start up in the adjacent room. She didn't think much of it at first. Maybe someone had sent a delayed print job. But the printer kept going. And going. And going. She went to check on it and found it printing page after page of the same thing. A single sentence repeated over and over. "Get out now! Get out now! Get out now!" She pulled the paper out and hit cancel, but the printer just started again. She checked the computer connected to the printer. Nothing in the print queue. She unplugged the printer from the computer. It kept printing. She unplugged it from the wall. For a moment it stopped. Then, impossibly, it started again, even though it had no power source. She didn't wait to see what would happen next. She grabbed her laptop and left the office. The next morning, when she came back with her colleagues, the printer was silent. But there were hundreds of pages scattered around it, all with the same message. Get out now. The firm finally replaced the printer after that. But sometimes, late at night, they can still hear the sound of a printer running, even though the old one was thrown away years ago. Story 7. The Conference Call from Hell. A man worked in sales for a tech company based in Austin, Texas. He frequently had conference calls with clients in different time zones, which meant a lot of late-night calls from the office. The conference rooms had video screens that would display the participants when the camera was on. One night, he was on a call with a client in Tokyo. It was just the two of them on the call, or so he thought. As they were discussing contract terms, he noticed a third participant join the call. The screen showed 3 boxes, himself, the client, and a third box that was completely black. He asked the client if he'd invited someone else to the call. The client said no, it was just the two of them on his end. The black box remained. No name, no video, just darkness. Then slowly, something started to appear in the black box. It was a face. Pale, distorted, with hollow eyes that seemed to stare directly at him through the screen. The mouth was open in a silent scream. He tried to remove the participant from the call, but nothing worked. The face just kept staring. The client couldn't see it. On his end, there were only 2 participants. But on our storyteller's screen, that face was there, getting clearer and clearer. He ended the call abruptly, making up an excuse about technical difficulties. But here's the terrifying part. After he ended the call, The screen should have gone dark. Instead, the face remained, still staring, still screaming silently. He unplugged the monitor. The face stayed. Finally, he left the conference room and locked the door. The IT department investigated the next day. They found nothing wrong with the system, no unauthorized access, no recordings of a third participant. But he refuses to use that conference room anymore. And sometimes, late at night, other employees report seeing a face on the monitor, even when the system is turned off. Story 8. The Elevator. A woman worked on the 15th floor of an office building in downtown Los Angeles. Every day, she'd take the elevator up and down, along with dozens of other employees. It was a normal part of her routine, until the night she worked late and found herself alone in the elevator. She got in on the ground floor and pressed 15. The elevator started moving up. But when it reached the 7th floor, it stopped. The doors opened. Nobody was there. The 7th floor was dark and empty. The doors closed and the elevator continued. It stopped again on the 10th floor. Again, the doors opened to an empty, dark hallway. The doors closed. This happened 3 more times. Floors 12, 13, and 14. Each time the elevator would stop, the doors would open to darkness and then close again. She was alone in the elevator the entire time. Nobody got on. Nobody got off. When the elevator finally reached the 15th floor, she stepped out quickly, relieved to be on her floor. But as she walked toward her office, she heard the elevator ding behind her. She turned around. The elevator doors had opened again, even though she hadn't pressed any buttons. Inside the elevator, standing in the back corner, was a figure. Tall, dark, and completely still, staring directly at her. The doors started to close. She didn't wait to see if the figure would step out. She ran to her office, grabbed her things, and took the stairs down all 15 floors. She never took that elevator alone again. And to this day, the elevator still stops on those same floors, 7, 10, 12, 13, and 14, even when nobody presses the buttons, even when nobody is inside. Story 9. The Voice on the Phone. A man worked customer service at an insurance company in Phoenix, Arizona. His job involved answering calls from clients who had questions about their policies. It was tedious work, but it paid the bills. Most calls were routine, until he got a call that changed everything. It was late, around 11 p.m. He was one of the few people still working in the call center. The phone rang and he answered with his usual greeting. On the other end, there was silence. Then a voice. A woman's voice, faint and distant, like she was calling from very far away. She said, "Help me. I'm trapped." He asked for her name and policy number, thinking maybe she was a client who'd been in an accident. But she just repeated, "Help me. I'm trapped." He asked where she was, what kind of help she needed. The voice said, "I'm in the building. I'm trapped in the building." He felt a chill run down his spine. He checked the caller ID. It was an internal call, coming from somewhere inside the building. He asked which floor she was on. The voice said, "The basement. I'm in the basement. Please help me." His company's building didn't have a basement. He checked the directory. No basement level. But the call was coming from inside the building, from an extension that didn't exist. He transferred the call to his supervisor, but when the supervisor picked up, the line was dead. Security checked the entire building. They found nothing. No woman, no basement, no extension matching the one on the caller ID. But for weeks after, Other employees reported getting the same call. A woman's voice, faint and desperate, saying she was trapped in the basement. A basement that didn't exist. Story 10. The email from the past. A woman worked in human resources at a financial firm in Boston. Part of her job was managing employee emails and making sure the system was running smoothly. One Monday morning, she came into the office and found an email in her inbox that made no sense. The email was from a former employee named David Chen. The subject line read, "Please help me." The body of the email said, "I'm still in the building. Why won't anyone answer me? I've been here all weekend. Please help." The strange thing was, David Chen had left the company 5 years earlier. His email account had been deactivated. There was no way he could have sent this email. She checked the email headers. It had been sent from his old work computer, from his old desk on the 8th floor. She went up to the 8th floor. The desk that used to be David's was now occupied by someone else. The computer had been replaced years ago. There was no way the email could have come from that computer. But it had. The email headers confirmed it. She asked around about David Chen. Her colleagues who'd worked with him told her that David had been a dedicated employee who often worked weekends. But one weekend, 5 years ago, he'd come into the office and never left. He'd had a heart attack at his desk. Nobody found him until Monday morning. She deleted the email and tried to forget about it. But the next Monday she got another email. Same sender. Same subject line. "Please help me. I'm still in the building. Why won't anyone answer me?" This kept happening every Monday morning for months. Always from David Chen's deactivated email account. Always from his old computer that no longer existed. IT couldn't explain it. They couldn't stop it. Eventually, she set up a filter to automatically delete any emails from that address. But she knows they're still coming. Every Monday morning, David Chen is still sending emails, still asking for help, still trapped in a building he died in 5 years ago. These 10 stories are real. They happen to real people in real offices, places where we spend most of our waking hours, places we think of as safe and mundane. But sometimes something happens that reminds us that nowhere is truly safe, that sometimes the scariest things don't happen in dark forests or abandoned houses. They happen in fluorescent lit offices, in conference rooms, in elevators. The next time you're alone in your office at night, remember these stories. Listen carefully to the sounds around you. Pay attention to the shadows in the corners, because you never know what might be sharing that space with you, what might be watching you from just out of sight, what might be waiting for you to notice. Thank you for watching. If you have your own office horror story, share it in the comments below. And remember, always check the reflection in your computer screen before you shut it down. You never know who might be standing behind you. Sleep well, if you can.